Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us for Thursdays with AARP Wisconsin. I am Amber Miller, the Associate State Director of Community Outreach with AARP Wisconsin. Before we get to our guest speaker, there are just a couple of announcements that I always like to start off with. So the first one, of course, is we have a lot of upcoming virtual events that you can find on our website below. And there's a few that you can pre-register for registration, but then also you can register for reminders. So definitely there's some good stuff coming up. So please take a look at that. Next is our community, AARP Community Connections program. So this I've talked about for the past couple months, but it's such a great program that you can log on and see if there's volunteer opportunities in your community. And this is on a smaller scale, so it might be helping a neighbor or somebody within your community. But then we also have AARP Friendly Voice, and this is a free program. You could be any age. You do not need to be a member of AARP, that you can talk to one of our trained volunteers. And this could be a daily call, a weekly call, a monthly call, but it's just to hear a friendly voice on the other end. And that you can also find below. Next, we'll be talking about our Small Dollar Big Impact Grant. So from last week's show, we talked about how the application was due, and now the next application is due, which is August 17th. This is our cycle 4 funding. Small Dollar Big Impact Grants is exactly what it sounds like. You could have an ideal. Maybe it's to revitalize something in your community. Maybe it's to paint a mural. Anything that you could do that impacts your community is exactly what we want you to apply for. So applications are due August 17th. The website is below. The application itself is very easy, should probably take you less than 10, 15 minutes to do, but we're looking forward to seeing all your great ideas. And then also at the end of this program, I will announce one of the 2 winners that won the last cycle of funding. So please stick with us towards the end of the show and I'll share that with you. So next, I would like to introduce our guest, and she might look a little familiar. She works with, this is Lisa Lamkins. She works with AARP Wisconsin, and we've also had her on the show before. So welcome, Lisa. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Amber.
Thank you. So Lisa's here actually to talk about a very important topic. Of course, we know this is an election year, and with everything that's going on with the epidemic, people are still a little like, how do I vote? How can I vote safely? Absentee voting. And so Lisa's here to talk about the new program or the new initiative that AARP launched for election year, which is Protect 50 plus voters. So Lisa, I'll turn it over to you for your opening comments, and then we'll get some questions from our audience. And if you do have a question for Lisa during this, you can put it below in the comments below on Facebook. And if you're joining us on YouTube, you can also ask questions. Our producer, Darren, will be keeping an eye out for those. So Lisa, as I was talking about, I know AARP launched the new campaign. So what can you tell us about it?
Yeah, Amber, thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about this because I'm really excited about it. As you mentioned, this election season, a lot of people are really nervous and concerned. People feel strongly about making sure that they are able to cast their vote this election season. But at the same time, people are worried about their, health and safety and about minimizing any risk of catching the virus this season. So we've launched this new campaign effort, Protect Voters 50 Plus, to really help people understand their options because there are lots of ways that people can vote and still stay safe. And these are things that really apply to anybody. They're, working parents, family caregivers, seniors in nursing homes. We want to make sure that people feel confident and that they feel safe and secure in casting their votes this election season.
And so I know that Protect Voters 50 Plus is an AARP initiative, but when I was, reading information about it, to me, it really can serve for all ages. It could be a first-time voter, somebody who's voted many times, but I know across the board, everybody's just worried about voting. So do you think this initiative also kind of would help even under 50 voters?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the things we're talking about are good for people of all ages. Obviously, our focus is on older voters. They're our membership. And to be honest, older voters make up a really influential voting bloc. I mean, they're the most important demographic for the obvious reason that they show up the most. They show up consistently and they turn out at much higher numbers than younger voters do. But the good thing is, all of these options work for people of all ages. So I encourage you to share this information, with friends and family, to make sure that everybody has their chance to vote this season.
Absolutely. And Lisa, you mentioned that there's 3 easy ways to vote. So if you could talk a little bit about what they are.
Sure. Um, well, probably the best way to vote is for this season is by absentee ballot. And the great news is in Wisconsin, people don't need any reason to vote by absentee ballot. So we'll talk a little bit more about those, but basically you can vote from home by requesting an absentee ballot. You can do early voting, which means you can avoid long lines at the polls by going 2 weeks early. Early voting opens 2 weeks ahead of the election here in Wisconsin. And then, of course, people still have the option to go to the polls on election day. And we have some tips we can talk about later on for people to stay safe if they choose to go to the polls.
And, the election, of course, and voting is so important. And I think what's great about this initiative, it still encourages people, like, your vote does count and you do have a way to be heard. So I'm really excited that we have you on today, just to also put people's mind at ease a little bit, that there are resources out there that can kind of help you guide you through this whole voting experience. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, Wisconsin is unique in the sense that in the past, we are not a state where people have done a lot of absentee voting. But as we've seen, and we saw in the April 7th election, and we're seeing for our upcoming August 11th primary, people are requesting absentee ballots in droves. The thing is, there are some I don't want to say tricks, but there are a couple of things people really need to be aware about when it comes to voting by absentee ballot. And, some of these things really can make the difference between who wins or loses when it comes to especially the presidential election. The margins are so slim. If ballots get thrown out because they're not completed correctly, that really can make a difference. One of the number one things we have seen with absentee ballot applications is people aren't following the instructions when they get their absentee ballot. So when you get your absentee ballot in the mail, you will receive the ballot itself, instructions, and an envelope. And people aren't necessarily paying as much attention to the envelope as they should be. So when you do your ballot, you need to also make sure you fill out the absentee ballot envelope. And right now, I think you're seeing a copy of the top part of the envelope, which is basically like putting your return address on there. So the yellow highlighted areas, it's information, your name, your address, that kind of stuff that needs to go on the top part of your ballot. But on the bottom part of your ballot is where people tend to overlook, because these items aren't highlighted in yellow when you get the actual ballot. So what we want to do is make sure that people know your absentee ballot return envelope requires 2 signatures. In the top box, it requires the signature of the voter. That's your signature. The bottom box is the signature and address of a witness. So in Wisconsin, we have a witness requirement for an absentee ballot. The witness can be anybody, any U.S. citizen age 18 or older. Doesn't have to be a notary. It doesn't have to be a poll worker. It doesn't have to be an election official. It can be your next door neighbor. I had my 20-year-old son sign, as witness mine. It doesn't matter. but they have to they have to sign that and put their address on there. If it doesn't have that signature, then it is not counted. And that is the number one reason that absentee ballots were not counted in the April election. So we just wanted to really point that out to make sure that people fulfill that requirement.
Great. And I know we have a question that we'll just get to just in just a moment. So the website that's scrolling below, Lisa, if somebody was to go to that website, what kind of information would they find?
Well, the good thing is that website leads you to something called Everything You Need to Know About Voting in Wisconsin. And it really has terrific information. It outlines information on voter registration. It outlines information on photo ID requirements for voting in the state. It outlines information on getting absentee ballots.
Mm-hmm.
It includes links to all of the places in the state election system where you can request things, where you can register to vote, where you can find out who your local municipal clerk is, because those clerks are going to be a really important resource for people as we're kind of facing another election season within a pandemic.
And can people request their ballot now for the presidential election?
This is our number one tip. The number one problem we're seeing is that people are not planning ahead enough. So the very, very best thing you can do is to request your ballot now for the November general election. That request goes on file, and then your clerk is able to send it out. I think it's 47 days ahead of time. And the great thing is, it will allow enough time for the mail system to work. We know there were lots of challenges with last minute requests in April. And the official deadlines don't allow enough time for the mail system to realistically work. So for example, today is the last official deadline to request an absentee ballot for the August 11th primary. Well, if your request gets in by 5 p.m. today, as allowed by law, that doesn't allow your local clerk enough time to process that request, get the ballot, the instructions, the envelope, and get it in the mail to you for you to fill it out, and then for you to mail it back, and to get to the clerk by 8 p.m. on election day. The same holds true in November. So you can request that absentee ballot for November right now, and that's the best and easiest thing you can do.
Absolutely. Thinking ahead, and even just regular mail has, it used to take 2 days to get somewhere, and now it's taking up to a week. So imagine when there's absentee voting, how busy it'll be. So we are going to get to our first question. This is from Arlene. I keep seeing posts about needing 2 stamps for absentee ballots. My August 11th ballot is already have postage on it. Can you clarify?
You should receive a return envelope that already has postage on it. Now, again, clerks are, humans. These are being processed by humans, and so it's possible that there could be some error in there. But the vast majority of the time, your return envelope should have postage on it. Now, if it doesn't, and you don't want to, you're worried about postage, there are a couple of things you can do. One, you can go ahead and deliver that ballot to your clerk's office. If you do it now, it's early voting, there aren't long lines. And a lot of municipalities are putting out drop boxes.
Mm-hmm.
I know around my town, there were boxes at the library, there was one at the community center. You can kind of drive up, just put it in a slot, it's a locked slot. And then, the clerks will go around and collect those. So there are other ways you can get your ballot to the clerk. That was a great question. Thanks.
Right. So once again, I'm Amber Miller. I'm here with Lisa Lamkins with AARP Wisconsin, talking about the new AARP initiative around safe voting. So all about protecting the 50 and older during the voting season. So if you have any questions, you can put them below. So Lisa, another thing that I've heard a lot, even so I'm in Milwaukee, so I've heard it, since April, is that mail-in voting is not secure and there's a lot of fraud. So should people be worried about this?
We are hearing that a lot, and it's really unfortunate because there's been study after study after study over a long period of time that shows the incidence of any kind of fraud related to voting by mail is actually very, very, very low. On top of that, Wisconsin has a really good system in place when it comes to our voting system. And in fact, they're even trying to improve the system we have. If you think about it, we have things like a photo ID is required in order to request your absentee ballot. Now, that can cause a challenge for some people, but it is something that helps keep the system safe and secure. We also know that the Wisconsin Elections Commission, and they run the elections here in our state, or they sort of oversee all of them, and they're run by local clerks. But the Elections Commission has been in conversation with the post office, and they are going to be putting intelligent barcodes on absentee ballots so they can be tracked through the processing system. Now, it won't happen everywhere, in part because there are some clerks who don't have the ability to print these barcodes onto the envelopes, but for many, many people, there will be yet another safeguard. So, people really should be confident that their mail-in ballot is safe and secure. I think the bigger challenge is really overwhelming the system at the last minute, and that's why we're encouraging people to start early.
Absolutely. So it looks like we have two questions. We'll take the first one next from John Schuster. So if I voted absentee ballot on spring primary, will I automatically get the ballot for the presidential election?
That is an excellent question, John. And the answer is it depends. It really depends how you requested your ballot for the spring primary. People in Wisconsin have the ability to request absentee ballots get mailed to them for all elections during the year. But you can also request absentee ballots get mailed to you one at a time. So if you requested, hey, go ahead and send them to me the rest of the year, you will get an absentee ballot. Now, that being said, I will say for the first time ever, the Wisconsin Elections Commission is going to mail absentee ballots to all registered voters who have not already requested one. So it looks like they're looking at mid-September for a mailing to go out to registered voters around the state who maybe haven't requested one in the past. So this year, and just for this general election, people will get that absentee ballot application. Now, it's important to note it's an application that is getting mailed to folks. It's not the actual ballot. So you get an application and you have to fill that out. It's basically your request to receive the absentee ballot by mail. It's the easiest thing you can do, and we really encourage people to complete that application.
Great, thank you so much. Next is from Jim. Should older Wisconsinites be worried about voting in person, and what are municipalities doing to keep folks safe at the polls?
Well, that's another great question, because of course that's an option, and that we will have many people who want to still go to the polls on election day. And I think it really behooves people to think about a couple of questions. And there are questions you can ask your clerks ahead of time. Find out, for example, if they're going to offer separate lines for older people, if there are particularly long lines on election day. Find out how often the voting machines are going to be cleaned. Find out if the poll workers and election officials will have personal protective equipment. Will they have masks and gloves? Will there be hand sanitizer available? Will the location be practicing social distancing? All of these things are good questions to ask your clerk so that you know in advance if you can feel safe and confident going to the polls on election day.
So really, the clerk should be your new best friend.
The clerk is definitely your new BFF. Now, here's what I'll also say. And you can find the clerk if you go to that aarp.org/WI votes. It leads you to a website where you can find out your local municipal clerk. This week they might be pretty busy, right? We have an election coming up next week, and we already have 10 times the normal amount of absentee ballot requests for our August primary election. So now might not be a great week to talk to them, but give them another week or so, and you can certainly try to contact your local clerk. We really encourage people to be in contact because things might have changed. Polling places may be changing due to the pandemic. You might have voted in the same location for the last 5 years, but if it was a school or a nursing home, I used to vote at a senior center and they're closed. So you want to find out where the polling places are going to be in your local area.
And the one thing too is, voting, of course, is so important, but there might be folks on here live or also rewatching this video that maybe have a neighbor or a family member that might not have access to this information. So what a great way to share this with them on there's, multiple ways that you can vote this year. And it's just really important that people get out and vote this year. Your vote does count, and this is a perfect time to be heard.
Absolutely. And I think that's really, our number one message, as it always is. AARP has done nonpartisan voter engagement for decades. And this is really no different. Every vote does count. If you think about it, the presidential election was decided on the margin of 22,000 votes in Wisconsin. That is nothing when you look at the number of votes cast across the country. So we encourage everyone to vote. And this season, and it really, I think, is turning into an election season rather than election day. And so I'm really using that term election season because start now, plan ahead. You can get your ballot, get your request in for your absentee ballot for the November election now, have it done a month ahead of time, and then you can be secure that your vote is cast and that you have minimized any risk to exposure of the virus.
Absolutely. If you have any questions or comments for Lisa today regarding safe voting, you can put them below. But I love, Lisa, what you said about, you could do it, request your ballot after this show and just, check mark it off of I got it covered. And now you're just one step closer to being able to do your absentee voting.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. And that's really our big message is do it now. Why wait? There's no reason to wait. It takes you about 30 seconds to request it. People who don't have a photo ID on file will need to include a photo ID with your absentee ballot request. You can either upload it into Wisconsin's election system. And again, you can get there by going to that aarp.org/WI votes. You can just take a picture with your camera and upload it right into the system. Or if that is a challenge for you, you can actually mail in a photocopy of, say, your driver's license. And you can get a copy generally often at a grocery store at their customer service counter will do a photocopy. So do know, please be aware you have to include that with your request. If you already have a photo ID on file for this year, which obviously a lot of people do, then you don't need to provide it again. You only need to provide it once during the course of the year.
Absolutely. And just keep in mind, too, what we're talking about today, even though AARP, our initiative is the 50-plus voter, that what Lisa's talking about today is for all age groups, that there's options out there for everybody to vote. So make sure that you also can share this video on your page. So now passing the education along to your friends and family. So Lisa, what resources are available for people to vote?
So there actually are a lot of terrific resources. And I encourage people to go to the aarp.org /WI votes because that has everything. And it really will take you to Wisconsin's kind of main election online portal, if you will. And I have to look at my little notes here. Because there's also a phone number. I know not everybody is definitely tech savvy, but people can if you go to that aarp.org/WI votes, it gets you to the election system. It will also take you to a place where you can find out information about photo ID. But the Wisconsin Elections Commission also has information, and people can give them a call. And as I said, they're the ones who oversee the elections, and their phone number is 866-VOTE-WIS. So it's 866 VOTEWIS.
Great. We should be able to put that up in just a moment. And it is true, not everybody has access to internet. So the phone number will be popping up shortly. Pass that along to your network, to your friends, to your family who still might have questions that they need answers to.
Yeah.
Great.
And one last thing I'll just kind of share with folks is we're doing a lot of informational education around this, and people can look forward to some webinars. We're going to be sponsoring. We've already done actually 3 webinars on safe voting. We have a volunteer who has a terrific presentation on voting safely in Wisconsin during this pandemic. It's free, it's virtual. We've had a clerk join us to actually, help answer questions. So you can check out AARP's webpage where it will be listed with all of the other virtual events. And so we encourage people to join us for those as well, where we'll go much more in depth into all of these issues.
And I did have the pleasure of sitting on that virtual webinar, and it is amazing. So definitely keep an eye out on our events page. I can definitely see it being done probably before the end of the month and then going forward. So, and then if they have any questions.
If people have any questions, they can email us at wisstate@aarp.org. It will find its way to me, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that people have.
Great. And before you go, we just got a really nice comment from Jean Marie. Hi, Lisa. So nice to see you. Thank you for all the good info. We are signed up to get our absentee ballots from here and out. Already did the primary one.
Excellent, Jean Marie. Nice to see the picture of you and David as well. And, I encourage everyone to follow in Jean Marie's footsteps and go ahead and request those absentee ballots now for the November general election.
Absolutely. And Lisa, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. This is such critical and important information. So if you're not watching us live, please share this video you can share it on your YouTube or your Facebook page, but make sure that you're also spreading the information to your network, community, and neighbors, family, and friends so that we can ensure everybody can vote safely this election season. I will start using that word also.
Yes, thanks so much for having me, Amber. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And Lisa, I'm going to have you hang out just for a moment. So join us for next Thursdays with AARP Wisconsin, why we talk with Ann Katz all about the arts and livable communities. So when you think of livable communities, we talk about green space and transportation, but there's a whole other aspect of it that we're really excited to talk about. So join us back here next Thursday on Facebook or YouTube on Why I Talk with Ann Katz. And then lastly, I'm really excited to announce one of our 2 winners today for the Small Dollar Big Impact Grant that we mentioned in the beginning of this presentation. So drum roll, please. One of our winners, and we're very excited for them, is the Beaver Dam Area Chamber of Commerce. They were awarded a $1,000 grant through the Small Dollar Big Impact Grant to support their drive-in and outdoor community nights. So as we know with the epidemic, to spend time with friends and family during this time physically distancing is very important. So we're really excited for them to launch this program, and maybe like their Facebook page and you'll get some more information about it. But I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We're all thinking of you, and please be safe, and we will see you next Thursday. Take care.